Sandra casually takes Keanu's reserved seat at an event, not realizing who it belongs to. Later, she's stunned to learn that the man she inconvenienced is the quiet hero who once saved her husband's life. Guilt, gratitude, and an unexpected bond turn an awkward seating mistake into a life-changing moment. Sometimes a story begins with something as small as sitting in the wrong chair. You don't feel the shift in that moment, but later, you look back and realize your whole life quietly turned on that tiny choice. Sandra Bullock was already 10 minutes late, and the zipper on her dress had declared war on her patience. Outside the Lowe's Angels Hotel, camera flashes were still exploding like tiny fireworks, but inside, the charity gala had already started. She stepped through the doors with a practiced smile, her arm looped through her husband Mark's, pretending she wasn't a little out of breath and a lot exhausted. Mark, in his slightly crooked tie and calm brown eyes, gave her that soft, teasing look that always made things feel lighter. "We're fashionably late," he whispered. "Or just late," she muttered back, and they both laughed, the kind of easy, warm laughter that comes from years of surviving life together. The ballroom glowed with warm golden light, all glassware and chandeliers and polite applause. This wasn't just another Hollywood party. It was a fundraiser for wildfire first responders and accident rescue teams. On stage, a firefighter was telling a quiet, heartbreaking story about smoke and radio calls and the small, stubborn reasons people choose to keep going. Mark's grip on Sandra's hand tightened as they slipped along the back wall, trying not to disturb anyone. He always got quiet at events like this, ever since that night. Their assistant, Mia, appeared at Sandra's elbow, whispering directions like a mission control operator. "Table 7 near the front, name cards on the plates. Please don't ad-lib the seating, guys, the organizer will explode." Sandra gave her a small salute, half joking, half tired. The last thing she wanted was to make some volunteers' night harder. But the room was dim, the music low, and as they reached table 7, the chairs were already a puzzle of coats, clutches, and cocktail napkins. There was one empty chair near the center, half turned away from the table as if it had been saved. A plain, white place card lay on the plate, the name written in neat black letters. Sandra didn't even look at it. Her feet hurt, her back ached, her smile muscles were begging for mercy. She glanced around at the sea of perfectly styled heads and glittering dresses, then leaned toward Mark. "If I don't sit down right now, I'm going to collapse into the mashed potatoes," she whispered. He smothered a laugh. "Sit, I'll charm whoever you're stealing from." That was one of the things she loved about him. Even in rooms like this, he chose her side first every time. She slid into the empty chair, exhaling like someone finally dropping a heavy bag. The card flipped slightly under her fingers, and her eyes skimmed it almost by accident. K. Reeves. For a second, her brain didn't connect the letters to the man. Hollywood was full of initials, but then a woman across the table leaned to her friend and murmured, "Keanu's running late. He's never late." The word hit her stomach like a small stone. Keanu, as in Keanu Reeves. As in the quiet, kind man everyone in Hollywood seemed to have a story about. Sandra's throat went dry. She had just sat in Keanu Reeves's seat. Across the table, an older fire captain with a weathered face and careful eyes was talking to Mark. "You ever been in a bad crash?" he asked. Mark chuckled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Once," he said softly. "A long time ago, some stranger pulled me out before the car caught fire. I never saw his face clearly, just a voice, calm, steady." Sandra's chest tightened. She remembered that night too, even though she hadn't been there when it happened. She remembered the hospital smell, the phone call that shattered her sleep, the way she'd run down long white corridors praying to a God she wasn't sure she believed in. She remembered the doctor saying, "If that man hadn't stopped his bike and pulled him out, your husband wouldn't be here." In Mark's mind, the memory played like a movie he could never turn off. Rain slashing across the freeway, headlights blurring into white streaks. The impact, sudden and brutal, spinning metal and glass. The world upside down, seatbelt pinning his chest, the taste of blood, the smell of leaking fuel. And then, cutting through the panic, a calm voice outside the shattered window. "Hey, stay with me, I've got you." Strong hands reaching in, fighting the jammed door, dragging him out just seconds before orange flames crawled along the hood. A helmet, a dark jacket, rain on leather. That was all he remembered. No name, no thanks, just the feeling of being carried to safety by a stranger who vanished before the sirens arrived. Back in the warm, perfect ballroom, Mark's eyes lowered to the linen tablecloth. "I always thought I'd meet him again," he admitted quietly to the fire captain. "Tell him thank you. Tell him everything that came after because he stopped that night. My marriage, my kids, my whole second chance." Sandra listened, something in her chest twisting. She reached under the table and squeezed his knee, a little anchor of touch. They had survived incredible storms together. Fights, distance, the pressures that chewed up most couples in their world. And beneath it all was this invisible thread. Some nameless man on a dark highway who had given them the chance to even have those problems, those late-night apologies, those mornings making coffee in silence and then smiling anyway. The fire captain nodded. "Funny thing about real heroes," he said. "Most of them don't want to be found, they just do the right thing and keep moving. We had a movie star once stop at a crash years back. Wouldn't give his name to the press, nothing, just helped, then left. We found out later who he was from a rookie who recognized him." He chuckled to himself. What was his name? Reeves, Keanu Reeves. Never met a guy so allergic to attention. The name hung between them, casual and heavy at the same time. Mark's brow furrowed, like some far-off memory had just lit up at the edges. Sandra's hand stilled on his knee. Under her palm, his leg tensed. At the next table, someone laughed too loudly. On stage, the speaker finished, and polite applause rolled through the room like a soft wave. At table 7, Sandra suddenly felt every inch of the chair she was sitting in. Keanu Reeves's seat. The man the organizers had practically begged her to convince to attend because people trusted him, believed him, liked him without trying. The man whose name was on half the whispers in the room. She imagined him arriving and finding her in his place, awkward, rude, ungrateful, her cheeks warmed. "The moment he walks in, I'll move," she thought. "I'll apologize, I'll joke about it, it'll be fine." But underneath the nervous humor, something else was stirring, a strange, sharp feeling she couldn't name. The MC walked back onto the stage, the lights dimming a little more. "Tonight," he said, his voice echoing over the hushed crowd, "we honor not only our first responders, but also the everyday heroes who choose courage over comfort." A spotlight swept gently over the room. Sandra's heart picked up its pace. Mark straightened in his chair without even realizing it. "Years ago," the MC continued, "one of our guests stopped on a dark highway and pulled a stranger from a burning car. He asked for no credit, no attention, but that one act of kindness changed an entire family's story." At those words, Mark's fingers curled slowly into fists on the tablecloth. His breath caught. The ballroom, the clinking glasses, the soft laughter, all of it faded under the roar of rain and twisted metal he heard in his mind. Sandra turned to look at him, startled by the sudden, haunted look in his eyes. On stage, the MC smiled toward the back of the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome a man whose humility is matched only by his courage, Mr. Keanu Reeves." The room broke into applause as a tall figure rose somewhere behind them, but Sandra didn't turn right away. She was still facing Mark, watching his face drain of color, his eyes fixed on the sound of approaching footsteps. And then she heard it too. The same calm, low voice from a memory she'd only heard retold in hospital rooms and late-night confessions, now speaking just a few steps behind her chair. "Sorry I'm late," Keanu said quietly. Mark's head turned, his mouth opening on a breath that sounded like both recognition and disbelief. And Sandra realized, with a jolt that stole the air from her lungs, that she was sitting in the one seat that connected all of their lives in a way none of them yet understood. The applause washed over the room like soft thunder as Keanu stepped up to the table, head slightly bowed, that familiar shy half-smile on his face. He moved with a kind of careful ease, as if he was always trying to take up less space than people expected of him. Sandra twisted in her stolen chair, blood rushing to her face. From up close, he looked even more ordinary and extraordinary at the same time. Simple black suit, no flash, eyes that actually seemed to be paying attention to the people, not the cameras. His gaze dropped to the place card in front of her plate, then to her, and there was a flicker of surprise that turned almost instantly into kindness. "Oh God," she whispered, already half standing. "I am so sorry this is your seat. My feet revolted and my brain didn't get the memo," and she pushed her chair back too fast, almost knocking into the woman behind her. Mark reached to steady her, but his hand hovered, caught between helping his wife and the invisible force pulling his attention to the man standing in front of them. Keanu raised one hand, a small, calming gesture, as if diffusing a bomb made of embarrassment. "It's okay," he said, that same calm voice smoothing over the moment. "Please sit, I'm late, I'm the problem here." There was a lightness to his words, but no performative charm, no edge of ego. He glanced around the table, spotted an empty chair one seat over, and nodded toward it. "I'll grab that one. I promise I don't need my name printed on porcelain to feel important." A soft ripple of laughter ran around the table. The tension that had clenched Sandra's shoulders loosened by a fraction, but her cheeks still burned. She sank back into the seat that suddenly felt 3 sizes too small. Mark, meanwhile, barely heard the joke. The sound of Keanu's voice had thrown him backward in time, past the perfume and crystal and gentle music, into cold, blinding rain. For a heartbeat, the ballroom vanished. He was upside down again, trapped in mangled metal, the world reduced to the hiss of leaking fuel and the savage drum of his own pulse in his ears. Then, like a thread cutting through the chaos, came that same tone, low, steady, oddly gentle for a man fighting a jammed door. "Hey, stay with me. I've got you." In the present, as Keanu pulled out the extra chair and sat down, Mark's fingers dug into his napkin so hard his knuckles went white. Introductions passed around the table like a polite ritual. "Sandra, Mark, this is Mr. Keanu Reeves," the event organizer said proudly, as if the whole world didn't already know him. Keanu opened his hands a little in protest. "Keanu is fine," he murmured. He shook Sandra's hand with a warm, unhurried grip, his eyes meeting hers for a second longer than necessary, as if checking she truly was okay after the awkward start. Then he turned to Mark. When their hands met, a small electric jolt of recognition shot up Mark's arm. His throat went tight. Up close, the face from his fractured memory snapped into focus. The same strong jaw, the same serious eyes, older now, but unmistakable under the soft lines time had traced across them. "You all right?" Keanu asked quietly, noticing the faint tremor in Mark's hand. His tone carried no celebrity distance, just simple human concern. "Yeah," Mark managed, his voice coming out hoarse. "Just long day." Sandra's eyes flicked between them, sensing the invisible current but not yet understanding its source. Under the table, she slid her foot against Mark's ankle, a small, grounding touch. He pressed his heel lightly back against hers, his old silent code for "I'm here, I'm trying." The MC's voice floated over them, talking about heroes and sacrifice. But at table 7, something far more personal, far more fragile was trying to surface. On stage, a short video began to play, grainy dash cam footage of firefighters racing through night streets, a montage of rescues and near disasters. As the screen showed a reenactment of a car flipped on its roof beside a dark highway, Mark's lungs squeezed. It was too close, too familiar. He stared at his plate, jaw clenched. Beside him, Keanu's gaze lifted toward the screen for a moment, and his features shifted almost imperceptibly. For him, too, that kind of night wasn't just a story. It was memory. Years earlier, there had been no chandeliers, no linen, no applause. Just a stretch of wet freeway and the low growl of a motorcycle engine under him. He had been riding home late, face hidden behind a visor, the city lights smeared into streaks by the rain. The crash hadn't sounded like in the movies. It had been a single, ugly crunch of metal and the sickening skitter of a car spinning where it shouldn't. He'd seen the sparks, the sudden bloom of taillights twisting sideways. His body had reacted before his brain could weigh any options. He braked hard, pulled over, heart punching his ribs. Fuel smell. Broken glass glittering like evil stars. One car upside down, steam hissing from the hood, a faint orange flicker licking at the edges. He remembered dropping the bike, running. The world had shrunk to that one trapped figure dangling from the seatbelt. "Hey," he'd shouted above the rain. "Can you hear me?" There had been coughing, a ragged groan, the stunned confusion of someone halfway between life and the place beyond. The door had been jammed. He'd thrown his shoulder against it again and again, pain shooting down his arm. "Stay with me. I've got you," he'd said then, not as a line, but as a promise he refused to break. When the door finally gave and the heat licked closer, he dragged the man out, boots slipping on wet asphalt, adrenaline burning through every nerve. Sirens in the distance. Red and blue lights cutting the dark. And then as soon as paramedics had taken over and reporters started sniffing around, he'd stepped back into the shadows, helmet on, engine roaring back to life. No names, no interview, just gone. Now, sitting under crystal light years later, Keanu's thumb unconsciously brushed the edge of his water glass as that old memory overlapped with the man beside him. Something in Mark's posture, the way he kept flexing his left hand as if reassuring himself it still worked, tugged at that night in his mind. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe it was nothing. But when the MC's voice boomed, "Keanu, we're especially honored to have you tonight because of a story that could have ended very differently for one man on a rainy freeway." Mark's head snapped up, eyes wide. The room turned toward their table like a field of sunflowers seeking a single source of light. Keanu shifted in his chair, visibly uncomfortable with the spotlight now literally on him. He lifted a hand in a small, almost embarrassed wave. "It wasn't a big thing," he called out, his voice carrying more than he seemed to like. "A lot of people would have done the same." The fire captain from earlier leaned toward his mic. "That's the thing," he said. "Most people don't. Fear freezes them. Or they assume someone else will stop. Courage isn't about not being scared, it's about moving anyway." The audience applauded again, but Mark barely heard it. His heartbeat had become its own soundtrack. "He said that," Mark whispered more to himself than to anyone. Sandra turned sharply. "Who?" "Him," Mark breathed, staring at Keanu. You said that night. Stay with me, I've got you." His voice broke on the last word. The table conversation fell away. The distant clinking of glasses, the polite laughter from other corners of the room, none of it seemed real anymore. Keanu looked at him fully now, the distraction of the crowd bleeding out of his expression. His gaze sharpened, searching Mark's face like a man trying to see through fog. The MC had moved on to reading names of donors, but the real story at table 7 had narrowed down to one fragile, trembling thread. Sandra watched her husband's chest rise and fall too fast, saw the sheen in his eyes, the way his entire body leaned subconsciously toward Keanu, as if some magnet of unfinished gratitude had been pulling at him for years and had finally found its source. She reached for his hand under the table, fingers slipping between his, holding on like she had in the hospital that first night. He squeezed back hard, as if anchoring himself to the present. Mark swallowed, his voice barely more than a rough whisper. "Were you on Highway 14, he asked. "About 9 years ago, in the rain, a car flipped, fuel leaking." He struggled for each word as if pulling it out of deep water. For a moment, Keanu didn't answer. He just looked at him, really looked, and the busy, glittering room seemed to fade in his eyes, too. Then, slowly, he nodded once. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I was there." Something in Mark cracked open. All the years of not knowing, of wondering if the man who'd pulled him back from the edge had any idea what he'd saved, flooded his face. His throat worked once, twice, like he was trying to swallow a wave of emotion that wouldn't fit. He leaned in, his voice raw, his eyes locked on Keanu's. "You didn't just stop," he said. "You saved my life." For the first time that night, the famously composed, carefully private actor seemed to lose his practiced calm. He froze, the air between them vibrating with the weight of words neither of them had ever expected to say out loud, in this place, at this time. Two men on opposite sides of a miracle, finally seeing each other clearly.